Hey guys, before I carry on with the Philco 60 project, I want to clean up my workshop a bit. Oh, and I did do some testing on painting the Admiral T102. I sprayed this can initially with the engine red-orange, masked it off, and then used the ivory bisque, and then clear coated it with the engine enamel, and they are compatible, and it did work out pretty well. The only problem I had is when I pulled off the masking tape, it actually pulled some of the paint off. But I think that's because I put this paint over the shiny painted can surface and I didn't rough it up or use a primer before. But otherwise, I think the colors are great, and I think this will leave a really nice, hard, durable finish. Now, back to my workshop. I've been picking up more bits of test equipment, and it's just gotten a little unwieldy, so what I want to do is retire some of the pieces. I just don't use that often. By retire them, I mean put into storage. I'm still going to hang on to all this stuff for now. One item I know that I got to put away is the Hickok 615. As much as I like it and as cool as I think it is, I just don't use it that often. I've got other pieces that work better, and it's really heavy. So what I think I'll replace it with is the Echo 369 I did a video on earlier. I'll pull it down. The only hesitation I have on using this is I need to go through the calibration procedures and the markers and make sure this will work well enough for my purposes. There is no external output for the marker generator, so you can't hook up a frequency counter and check it. You actually have to crack open the case and calibrate it periodically. But otherwise, it works really well. I've also picked up some other sweep generators since I got that one. For example, this RCA WR514A sweep channelist. Unfortunately, this is for newer sets that use a higher intermediate frequency, I think around 44 or 45 megahertz. None of my sets are new enough to use that IF frequency, so none of the switchable markers will do me any good. However, I think the variable IF that goes 0 to 50, that I could still use perhaps, and maybe some of these other features. I don't have the manual for it. I'm not that familiar with it. I'm not sure, for example, what this output jack means here with the two plugs, although I do have the cable for it, luckily. But I'm not sure on this pod. I've got 3 alligator clips. I don't know what's what exactly. I would guess, well, no, there's no point in guessing. I just don't know. However, it was 99 cents. That's why I got it, but I think I can put this on the back burner for now too and put that in storage. I got this one a while ago. It's WaveTech 1002. Works pretty well, but I think I can retire that as well because most recently I got this WaveTech 1080, which is pretty sweet. Don't have the manual for this either, but I can guesstimate pretty well what the basic controls do, and I've checked it out and it seems to work fine. This is the newest piece of equipment I think I've got. Digital outputs for frequency and outputs in dBms. Can sweep all the way up to 1 gigahertz. It's a pretty nice piece of equipment. I really should invest the money though on this and get a manual. I'll keep the scope, of course, and I got to keep the 1077B, although I really need to restore this. I know there's some high voltage leaking in somewhere. I can kind of hear this hissing sound and I can smell the ozone, so at the very least I want to check the flyback and put some high voltage Corona dope on that. And it needs to be recapped and so on. The audio output doesn't work, for example. But it's an incredibly useful piece of equipment, so I'll do a whole restoration series on that guy. I'll keep this since I got that working fine. Got to keep the WR50B because it's the only sweep generator I've got that'll do AM radios. Probably retire the Night RC tester. I'll keep the one I showed earlier in the video, the solar RC tester that comes in a wooden box cooler, but they basically do the same thing though. and so I'll keep the other one around. This guy, I've never used it. I got this at an estate sale cheap. It's a Simpson volt ohm meter. Kind of unique in that it's a precision model, which means, or the reason they call it that is it does 10,000 ohms per volt, whereas most VOMs do 10,000 ohms per volt. So in other words, this loads down the circuit less when you put the probes on. It also has a pretty large meter, which will allow you to read it more accurately when you're doing analog readings. But I know there's at least one fried resistor, probably because somebody put too much current through it, like at the DC current range. And something else odd about this is the way they get this higher precision, especially on the resistance ranges, is it takes a 22.5 volt battery. They can still be ordered, but kind of expensive. Plus I've got all these VTMs and I've got a modern digital multimeter right here, so I just don't use this. Likewise, the Heathkit RF generator, that can go. And that guy, I don't think I've ever shown that in a video before. That is a flyback tester, and I think a yoke tester. Also has an eye tube. I have a better yoke and flyback tester though, so I've never bothered to do anything with this. But I do have the manual for it and so on, so I think before I retire this guy, I'll at least try to fire it up and use it, see if it actually works or not. And then I've got a few spare VTVMs, so I'll be putting some of these on the side. There's the ICO yoke and flyback tester. This guy I definitely will keep around. And these other VTVMs, I guess I'll put those into storage. Some of these I might actually sell. I now have, I think, 4 VTVMs. I really don't need that many. And then there's my Tektronix 465 I showed briefly during my Admiral TV restoration. Works fine, but as long as my HP scope is working, I really don't use that often. Sencor CR70 picture tube tester, got to keep that handy. Leader test pattern generator is fantastic, but I really want to put it somewhere where it's easier to get at, and I want to hook up these, or swap out these jacks for something more useful. It's kind of odd on this. It's meant for, well, it generates test patterns for TVs, but all the output jacks are BNC. Well, no TV's got a BNC jack on it, so I got to rig up some kind of BNC to 75 ohm TV connector or something, or maybe take these jacks out and put more conventional TV signal output jacks on it. Spare frequency counter, that can go somewhere. And then I got like my Dremel tools and drills and soldering guns and so on. Hewlett-Packard dual power supply. Don't use it often, but when I do, very handy, but that can probably be put somewhere a little less in the way. And then finally, what I want to spend the rest of this video on is this guy, which is another sweep generator. I'll pull it out and give you a better look at it. Before I move on to the sweep generator, I thought I'd spend a couple minutes talking about what's on the other side of my workshop. Very top shelf, refinishing supplies, veneer, rotten stone, pumice stone for rubbing out lacquer finishes. Below that, spray lacquer, toner lacquer, enamels, acrylic paints, and so on. And below that is where I keep all my parts. For this side I got mechanical stuff, screws, washers, nuts, wood screws, metal screws, sheet metal screws, and so on. Fuses, and I keep some of the miscellaneous bits from the projects I'm working on. For example, here are some parts for my Spartan 400. So screws and knobs and so on. Just keeps them safe and sound so they don't get lost. Below that in the larger tubs I've got potentiometers, tube sockets, more potentiometers, feet, rubber feet, plastic feet, and these are tube test sockets. You put these into your radio or TV, plug the tube into this, and then you can probe the voltages and signals on the set while it's in operation without having to dig underneath the chassis. Can be kind of expensive and hard to find, but if you see some of these, I'd say grab them if they're reasonably priced. Very handy to have. Over here I've got my resistors. I spent a bit of time taking the full range of values from 0 to about 10 meg and divided them up so that there'd be an even distribution between all the drawers, so might want to make note of that. These storage bins I got at Menards, they were, I think, only like $10 a piece, something like that, so pretty reasonable and very handy to have. What's in these? Well, I got a mishmash of stuff. Initially, I bought some grab bags off of eBay of 1/2 watt metal film 1% precision resistors. Not exactly authentic for, say, an antique radio, but I don't mind using these in TVs. They hold up well. They don't drift. Every resistor I've ever tested has been dead on as far as the value goes. Since then, I've picked up some others. I've got some actual carbon composition resistors I use occasionally for appearance sake. And for higher wattages like 1 and 2 watts, I've got these metal oxide guys. If you're just starting out, I definitely recommend getting an assortment. JustRadios.com, you can get some nice assortments, or check on eBay. Below that I got power resistors. I don't really keep any on stock. These are just ones I've got left over from various projects or ones I've pulled out of sets. Some really big 50 watt guys down here. Terminal strips are handy things to keep on hand. Sometimes you need to replace them because they've been broken, or you might need to mount some additional parts underneath the chassis, and these are really good for that. Heat shrink tubing. Got to keep some of this on hand. Got all different shapes and lengths and diameters and so on. Much better to use this than to wrap electrical tape around a connection if you want to make it, if you want to insulate something. Fuses. Always good to keep a bunch of fuses on hand. And I got a few of those CL90 type surge protectors as well. And again, I keep parts from various projects in here, like these are all the bits for the Philco 60 radio. And finally, in this last one here, I've got all my capacitors. All the film ones up here. I didn't put nice labels like I did on this side, but these are broken down similarly. So they start out here with the smallest value being 0.001 and continue up until we reach the 1 microfarad big guys down here. Also keep an assortment of brass and aluminum tubing. You never know when you need to shim something up or reinforce something or make up a probe or whatnot. Got a bunch of crystals from TVs and radios and so on. Mica caps. These can get kind of expensive, so I've got a lot I pulled out of sets, and I've also got a few newer ones. Luckily, these don't go bad too often because these can easily cost you several dollars a piece. And down here we got the electrolytics. 4.7, 10, and 22 in this bin, which I use more of these than anything else, especially in radios. TVs, you're getting into these guys, which are 33 and 47, and occasionally you need 68s and 100s, which I got in here. But that's about it, from say maybe 2.2 microfarad up to about 10 microfarad in a range of voltages. We'll cover just about any site you're likely to encounter. These guys you probably won't encounter too often. You might never ever have to replace one. These are doorknob high voltage capacitors. Any vintage black and white set made in the 40s and early 50s is likely to have one of these. Almost all of them are 500 picofarad or 500 microfarad, and they're rated for 20,000 volts. This goes on the output of the flyback, which then goes to the picture tube. This filters out any, well, at least some of the ripple in the high voltage supply. but they rarely go bad. That's why I said you'll probably never have to replace one. But they're kind of hard to find. I saw some on sale, cheap, so I grabbed them. Oh, and then there's my alignment tools. Sort of plastic tools designed to go into the slugs and IF cans so you can adjust them. You can't use metal because metal will actually affect the coil itself and will interact with the windings and throw your adjustment off. I got these assortments off of eBay for, I don't know, I think I bought 2 different lots. I doubt I paid more than $5 total for all these. Search around for like vintage TV parts, vintage radio parts, or tools, and you probably find these. I think you can still buy new kits too. I think maybe like GC Electronics, somebody like that still makes them. Well, that's about it. Just wanted to give you some idea of what you might want to keep in stock when you, if you're going to get into this hobby.